today's podcast, we have Kevin Stock. So Kevin, let's just get to it. Who is Kevin Stock?
Hey, it's a pleasure to be on your guys' podcast. I'm excited to talk. But that's a loaded question. So I don't know how much people want to know.
How about start with how did you come to carnivore?
Yeah.
What brought you to this lifestyle?
Yeah, so I have been, if we rewind many, many years, I got into health and fitness at a very young age because I was an overweight kid. So that was like the first domino that fell, which is like junior high. So I started eating like a weirdo in like 7th grade, and I lost weight. And anyways, I started researching, exploring, working out, like I said, eating weird food at a young age and learning more and more and more as I went along. We could fast forward. I ended up going, when I went into college, I was interested in the health fields. I decided on dentistry for a number of reasons. So I went to dental school, became a dentist, kind of worked in 2 areas in dentistry, one being dental sleep medicine, where I treat sleep disordered breathing, like snoring to obstructive sleep apnea. And also I do some pediatric dentistry. But I spent a lot of time just still researching, writing about health and fitness and sleep. And so it's just a big aspect of my life.
That's
So when you said, who is Kevin Stock? Depending on who you're asked, people know me in very different contexts. Kevin Stock in grade school is quite different than college versus dentistry versus, these just very variable buckets of life.
Yeah, you live in multiple lives. I'm curious. I can relate to the chubby child thing. When I was like 7, I used to literally have meals of a foot-long Subway meatball sandwich with a side of pretzel-filled cheese combos and a red Gatorade. So I was 7.
And her smaying rate,
Yeah.
I would just watch over her.
Do you recall what you used to eat?
So there's kind of like this infamous story, which is unfortunately true, is that like when I was young, like I loved cheese waffles. So like just waffles with cheese. So I ate a lot of cheese waffles. That was probably the beginning of the downfall right there. But yeah, so, and the thing is my mom was a nurse for over 40 years. So she was in the health field. My dad is not in the health field at all, but it just shows how like out of touch the world is with nutrition, because my mom sure thought, this is a fine thing to be feeding a child, right? That's what they want to eat, but obviously in my perspective, I don't think that's what you should be feeding children.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you said your mom was into pretty healthy foods, but how did you end up coming to carnivore? Did you do all the research on your own? Like when someone visits your website, it's very clear that you put a lot of time into research. So how do you go about that?
Well, so long story, like the research has been going on for, like I said, since I was young, and I've always been more scientifically minded. So I have notebooks and binders of like notes I had on like proteins and fats and carbs. And for like 20 years, when I studied these things, it was very much in the context of, I would say, health and fitness, but it was really fitness slanted. Like, what's going to help me lose fat? What's going to help me build muscle? And so all these research notes had kind of that lens, that view. Trying to make a long story short is I had a website where I blogged just a lot about fitness. And I had a couple fitness programs, like a fat cutting program, a muscle building program. It was called Muscle Science. So it was like science-based body composition training. And I closed that down shortly after I got out of dental school. I ran it while I was in dental school. So I'll talk about multitasking. But so to answer your question, how did I come to carnivore? After it sounds like, I don't, maybe arrogant, but I came to a point where I felt like I knew all there was to know about body composition. Like if someone came to me and they were like, look, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be, I could formulate a plan to be like, look, this is how we're going to get there. And be like quite confident that I could help someone get that as long as they did what I said, etc. So I don't want to say I lost interest in it, but it wasn't as exciting to me anymore. Continue the long story. My priorities changed. I was working a lot. I'm running a few different businesses, and I needed my top priority of physical fitness and body composition dropped down a rung, and the top priority became like mental ability and feeling good and having sustained energy throughout the day. So at that time, this is around 2016, I had my dental sleep medicine practice. I was doing another business with a friend, et cetera, et cetera. I started a ketogenic diet because I had read about ketogenic diets. I had done them in the past, but I think I would say I'd always cheated on the keto diet because I always kept protein higher than typical keto diets would recommend for body composition reasons. But I remember this time I was like, all right, I'm going to take the ketogenic diet serious. I limited protein to about 0.75 grams per pound to get into more deep nutritional ketosis and see if that really improved my mental capacity. And so that was what eventually led me into carnivore, because that experiment failed miserably. I lost a ton of muscle mass. I wouldn't say I gained any significant, statistically significant benefits in brain function. Maybe a little bit, but it's hard to say. So my research took a very different slant at that time, where I started studying a lot about plants. And I wish I could remember the first thing I read, which led me down the rabbit hole. But then I just started researching plants and plants and plants. I started eliminating them. And before I knew it, I was just eating meat. So for a while, it was like meat. And I remember I still had MCT oil to try and like keep the deep ketosis, or some kind of level of ketosis. But eventually, I ditched that. So from sometime in 2017 till today, I've just been eating meat and then talking about the research I found, as well as, continued research that I'm doing. So that was a long answer. But.
No. I'm sure you probably stumbled along something like oxalates or something. I don't know, but
it was something because I evaluated my diet at the time when I was doing the keto diet. I'm like, I'm not feeling that great, but like, what am I eating? And I was eating a lot of fats, but there was still a lot of vegetables, like a lot of broccoli. And so I remember I eliminated that. I remember I read about the complete lectin avoidance diet. On Self-Hacked, I think is what it was. They had a big article on lectin. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to eliminate lectins. I'd heard about them, whatever. So I did that. And then, so that eliminates a lot of plant-based foods. So if you eliminate lectins, and then, I went down the rabbit hole, eventually eliminated everything.
So, okay, when you transitioned to carnivore, what would you say the hardest thing was to overcome? Whether that's like a specific food that you just like wanted to keep in there, or whether that was like social life or anything like that?
I don't really have much of a social life, so that was not an issue. The hardest thing I've eaten, I would say, unnaturally compared to like most of the people, like the majority of my life. So people like, if I eat something that society we can quote unquote say is normal, most like that would shock people more so than like me eating weird like I do.
Yeah.
So socially was not such an issue because people just expect that out of me in my life by now. I think the hardest thing adaptation wise was just some adaptation symptoms. GI took a little bit to regulate, but when I got rid of all plants and was just eating meat, and especially a lot of animal fat, I did noticeably feel better mentally. So I was finally getting like the mental stamina that I wanted. The bowels took a little bit of issue to regulate, which I think was probably from a lack of fiber, because going from the keto diet, I actually had a lot of fiber in the diet to zero fiber. So that was probably the biggest shift. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, along the lines of social life, so this is a question that we get asked a ton, is like, how do you manage dating in carnivore? And for Sarah, that's not a problem.
Well, let's pre-curse this with, we agree with you on we don't really have much of a social life, so it's really easy to just kind of eat this way in your house and, share it on Instagram and it's whatever. But how do you actually deal with it in terms of like your dating life or at family social gatherings? Like, yeah.
So I've had a girlfriend for a few years now. And interestingly enough, so when we started dating, I was eating weird, but I was not total carnivore at that time. So she got just roped into it. And I'm the kind of person, like, it's not really going to bother me. Like, if she had a problem with it, I'd be like, well, all right. See you later, I guess.
I'm going to do me.
So, if someone's interested, you can always just rope them into it, eat normal, and then be like, no, see if they stick with you. But no, I don't think that's the way to go about it. You know what? I just think when it comes to dating, this is definitely not my expertise by any means, but it's like, I feel like if you're just yourself, like true to yourself and your own desires and what you want, like, first of all, that's what most people are attracted to in another person, like someone that's not really they're just comfortable to be who they are. I think that's probably attractive in a lot of people. Like I find that attractive in other people that are just like, look, this is who I am, whatever. I was talking with, and this is just a little side note, because I was one person I like. I don't agree with almost anything he says very often. His name's Aubrey Marcus. I love him, but he's just so authentically himself and puts himself out there in what people consider very vulnerable ways. And I'm like, I love listening to what he has to say just because he's so authentic. And I mean, that's just a way of saying, like, I think for me, that's the way I handle it. Like family situations, I don't really deviate. I'll just eat meat. And if people ask why, it's like, I'm happy to tell them why, whatever most family already know that I have this health focus, and they may not associate health and red meat together yet, but maybe I can help them make that association. So
yeah, I could not agree more. Honestly, and going to this lifestyle almost answered a lot of questions for myself within my health and my mental state, that I just feel more confident being myself at this point, because I don't have all of these, like, I'm not still trying to figure things out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you experience this too? Did you notice any differences in your mental health and your, like, overall just accepting who you are?
I think, so this is a great point. Something I should have mentioned. I think my initial fitness, ambitions as a young kid came out of insecurity. Like I was insecure in how I looked. And so so what drove me initially was like, look, I don't want people to see me as some fat kid or whatever. So like insecurities was like the impetus of this whole thing. Ironically, somehow it all, like the exact opposite was the result. So now I feel very like comfortable in who I am and how I eat, and so I totally understand people that would have a more insecure approach to what they're eating, because like I was like that, and for me it's just, I guess probably it comes with age too. Yeah. It's different being in your 30s than when I was in my teens or even in my 20s, where I probably cared a lot more what people thought about me back then than I do now. But yeah, so mentally and my relationship to food and others, how they see me and how I eat food is obviously much healthier now, because it's just like I do it for me, and that's about it. I think where I could chime in is like, I think this relates to other places, because when it comes to social media, and one of the things we initially talked about is like, I was very like, I look at you guys and you're so natural on social media. You put yourself out there. And I'm like, why am I not doing that? And one is I'm just more of a private person anyways, but there's probably some insecurity where it's like, do I really, like, what are people going to think if I post this on social? Is this even how you use? So I'm insecure about how to even use social media. Yeah. So, I mean, that insecurity thing, I think is such a huge thing in life, not only about food, but it's like, it impacts all aspects of life. And, just being comfortable being yourself, I think is, one of the best things someone could do for themselves. Yeah. And give them permission to be themselves.
I agree entirely. And I think that a lot of people who might be inclined to come to a carnivore way of eating or way of lifestyle, whatever you want to say, there's a chance that because it's promoted, which is very annoying, it's promoted as like a great way to lose fat. And it is.
Weight loss.
It cannot be. Yeah, exactly.
Right. The keto diet too, just because of like the low carbs, and people see reductions in inflammation, that many people might be coming from an insecure background because they might have some sort of eating disorder. And so just coupling that with now eating in a very radical way, I can see that being really, really hard to overcome, like just in terms of even bringing it up to people in their life. Yeah.
But speaking of like people wanting to get to carnivore, but maybe a little bit nervous in terms of maybe the social implications, what would be your biggest tip for someone just starting carnivore? Do you think that they should approach it a certain way, meaning like, the beef only? Should they gradually step in with keeping some vegetables, or just go full force?
Well, from more of like a social, psychological standpoint, there's several tips like people can use that I would still use if I'm just out and someone asks me, and you don't want to go into a deep, long explanation. You can just be like, oh yeah, I'm just doing like a health experiment, or I'm just testing for an allergy, or I'm just doing this 30-day experiment, whatever. You can use any one of these things to make others feel more comfortable to ask you about it, I guess, and be like, look, it's not a big deal. So there's all kinds of ththings you can say like that. As far as a more technical aspect, as far as getting into carnivore, I think that's where self-awareness is really important. Is like, are you the kind of person that likes to go all in, or are you the kind of person that needs to ease into something? I tend to be like an all in kind of person.
Yeah.
So for me and my personality, and a lot of people, I think that that have done carnivore, is it type A personalities that are kind of more like rigid, structured, go all in, track everything. That type tends to have a lot of success if they just dive on in. But there's just as many people that would be better off weaning in, be like, okay, I'm going to gradually eat more and more meat. I'm going to gradually eliminate more and more carb-based foods. And both approaches can work. There's pros and cons to each approach. So
it seems like you took the more weaning in approach because you were learning as you went.
Yeah, it kind of was, and it's like there was pros and cons to that, and so I was, just because it was more of because I more just experimented my way into it versus, if I was going to do it now, I probably, with what I know, I would just dive in.
Yeah.
But you can do it either way,
Yeah.
Because you guys, what I know, you more weaned in, while Ashley, you more dove right in, right?
Yeah. And it's just because of the timing of Sarah's bodybuilding show. It was like she had like 2 weeks before her show, and it was almost like, I'm scared to manipulate any variables to see how she would look on stage. But funny enough, when she actually did go strict carnivore, like the day after the show, she was leaner than she was.
But this is actually really funny. So in those 2 weeks, I actually was just now kind of starting carnivore, and I was questioning her the whole time. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you getting rid of plants? Like, I psychologically had this like attachment to them. And at the same time, I found myself on your website reading about like why I should try carnivore. So it was very helpful that you put out all those posts, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think that helps people a lot if they understand some of the science, or like if someone like, okay, I've read enough and I want my family to get on board. Look, I can send them articles, be like, look, this is why I'm doing this. So they feel like, there is logic behind this madness.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I got from your website was just you use an analogy of comparing the current way of eating, like our current time scale, to a clock, and realizing how little humanity has been eating this, quote, standard American diet relative to our evolution. And I think that was like the really take home message for me. Like, wow, wait, humans did not evolve eating any of this stuff. And seeing that, what is it, like the current standard American diet from industrial agriculture, like the revolution there, is like a second on the full clock. So
if you took a 24-hour clock, and 24 hours represents the whole human genus. Okay, so there's various species of humans that have existed over time. If we took all the human species, okay, because Homo sapiens are about 200,000 years or so in existence, but we had Neanderthals before that, and like early Homo habilis was several million years ago. So we put all of humans on a 24-hour clock. It was 5 minutes ago when that agricultural revolution came around. So for 23 hours and 55 minutes, we didn't have the grains that we have today. We didn't have the corn, the wheat, the rice, which are now, the three biggest foods that feed the entire world. But like those were not even eaten. And so until the last 5 minutes. And then the Industrial Revolution, like that's the last split seconds. That's the 1700s. And then the standard American diet, which were basically what we're eating now, like these are foods of the 20th century. Like we've only been eating these things for a few decades. So like, when people understand like that perspective, like I call that like the zooming out, like getting the big picture. It is eye opening. It's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be afraid of eating meat when that is what this, the human genus has been eating for millions of years. Like that has been the staple food. So
I think what's so awesome about you doing that is, like, we're talking about how to make this carnivore way of life sustainable and how to approach introducing it to other people in your life. If you bring in something that they can understand in a more concrete way, like just an example that relates to their life, it's a lot easier to understand why somebody would take this approach. So I think that's what's so awesome about your website, and what really drew us to you in the first place is because it gave us our first understanding outside of just like research papers and science, because you relate it back to life, and like that's just so useful.
And then we can zoom in.
Yeah. But I actually do want to touch on something we had you almost touched on, is I said people come to carnivore as a way to lose weight and lose fat, yet some people find that they actually gain weight. So can you talk a little bit about that? Why people might have different experiences and what they should expect?
Yeah, so this is probably what I get more message about than anything is this, because many people do come to the carnivore diet and they want to lose weight, and then they go on it and they see the exact opposite. And almost always these people have been at least some kind of yo-yo dieting history, where they've tried this diet, that diet, this diet. Often they've come from keto, they have some success with keto, and then they want to get more success, and they think, okay, now I can just eat all the meat I want and I'm going to drop the last couple pounds of fat. And like more often than not, that's just not the case. And it's often because like metabolically they are not where they need to be. And so, I give an example on one of the articles between like a John and a Sally. And like the John is, this guy who's been overweight, he's been eating the standard American diet. He hasn't really watched what he's been eating for 50 years. And then, his diet, whatever, he jumps on the carnivore diet, and then all he sees is success the entire time, right? He loses 50 pounds, 100 pounds. It's magnificent. Now, that's one story. That story is not uncommon. That happens all the time. But then you have Sally, who is someone that, goes to the gym, does a ton of cardio, tries and watch what she eats for, decades, tries that diet, and then she ends up gaining weight. Like that is just like the common scenario.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons why this can happen, why John can see success, and because if you think about it, John was starting off at such a terrible point body composition ways. Like any kind of diet he goes on, he's probably going to see success to some degree.
Yeah.
And so he's seeing just incremental success time over time. Someone like him, he's not going to worry about like counting macronutrients. He's not going to be stressing about the whole diet. He's just going to eat fully satiated, etc. So he's going to do a lot of things naturally, like how I'd recommend approaching the diet. Whereas like a Sally might be like, oh, am I eating too much fat? Should I restrict this? So there's a lot of nuance as to why a Sally will gain weight. And a lot of times it's just like a temporary thing before it's improvement. Other times people have unrealistic expectations. They want to look like a bikini model and by eating as much food as they want. And often in case that's just not realistic. Your body doesn't naturally want to carry extremely low levels of body fat. Like I've tested the limits here to try and like how low can I keep body fat over such a long period of time. And like I've found ways to manipulate diets to basically stay like quote unquote kind of competition ready year round, but it comes with like significant drawbacks. It's not something I recommend. So
when I read the Sally and John example, I was very nervous I was going to be the Sally. But what I found was that right from the start, I lost just a ton of information, and I kept seeing my weight go down. And at a certain point, I was a little nervous about this because so Ashley and I, we're very experimental and we track our macros. So that's how we've approached this. So I kept having to add in more and more fats and more protein to just food amount that I hadn't eaten in a very long time. And I still kept losing weight. I'm finally at a point where like I've balanced that out and I'm steadily increasing my weight, which is my goal right now. So,
but to clarify, she started from a super, super low body fat percentage.
Right.
Yep.
But I'm curious. I know you like doing research too, but in those articles that you post, you often recommend people to eat till satiated and not track their macros. How do you approach this? Yeah. How do you approach this? And what is your reasoning behind that?
So how do I personally approach it? I don't track macros.
Okay.
So one thing that I have going for me is that I have tracked macros in the past for a long time and just kept an eye on how much I like. So I have just a very intuitive feel of exactly how much I eat. Like I could eat a meal and then someone could ask me an hour later, be like, okay, you ate that. Like what are the macros? And like I could probably, get pretty darn close.
Yeah.
But I don't worry very much about everything I do is kind of, I use an intuitive approach like that as far as like protein and fats. And I have manipulated proteins and fats in various ways, but not via tracking, just using intuition. Like obviously I know this cut of meat has more fat and I I have an intuitive feel for how much fat that is versus a day where I eat leaner meats. So I stopped tracking since probably, I don't know, it was 2016 or something like that. I haven't tracked macros at all. And like, I think it's worth mentioning, like I stay pretty lean year round. And so it's very doable. Like people that want to stay lean, I get it. Like I still like to like be lean. But yeah, I don't track it. And the reason I recommend people not tracking early on is just a lot of times people need to heal, and heal is a very vague word. Yeah. And I like it just because it is vague and it will encompass different meanings to different people. And people need to, if they make that their top priority of like feeling good, letting the body heal and getting to a place where a lot of it comes down to getting healthy relationship with food again. Killing cravings or appetite hormones, things like that. And then oftentimes after 6 months, a year, they just ate until they were satisfied. Like their body composition is better than they even would have thought it would have been. Right. So then that whole tracking mindset goes out the window. You're free anyways. For other people that want to maybe increase muscle mass, decrease body fat even more, you can tinker then, but I'm like, tinker after that. Tinker after you get metabolically healthy and you feel good and things like that.
Yeah, I'm sure that has a lot of psychological benefits too, especially if they are coming from some sort of disordered background.
I think that's actually the number one thing someone should go for in a diet. That if they have fat loss goals, body composition goals, the number one thing they should strive for is a healthy relationship with food, because this is the reason why all diets fail. Is because they might stick with it for a little bit, but then they cave. Like willpower, they lose willpower. You can only be hungry for so long, right? Yeah. And then you eventually give up, or you're terribly unhappy forever, like one of the two. So if someone can fix the relationship with food where they feel satisfied, like they don't have cravings, they're not using all their willpower 24 hours a day not to go eat the ice cream, they actually have a chance at long-term success.
I could not agree more. And honestly, I think obviously we all love carnivore, but something that might be overlooked is that the key to any diet is honestly consistency. Like, can you be consistent with it? Can it fit into your lifestyle? It's not like carnivore is going to be some sort of magical weight loss pill. It's obviously incredible for your health, but it really comes down to, can you make it sustainable?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because, I get a lot of body composition questions just because that's kind of one of the areas I have some expertise in, I guess. And it's like people have they're starting carnivore, they have this body composition goal. I get it. And I tell them what I just told you. Like I would just don't worry about it for a while. But you can use the carnivore diet to get your body composition goals in the next 12 weeks or for whatever. I could make a plan for someone that does that, but that's not setting them up for long-term success. Yeah. And so my question is always do you want to get ready for a wedding, or are you trying to find something that you can a way of eating and a way of living that's going to keep you happy with how you look and how you feel for the long term? And that long-term approach, I think, is what's key. Because I look at diets like Atkins diet, because very successful diet for so many people for short periods of time. Because so many people I know that did that diet, they lost a ton of weight, but I don't know any person on this planet that has stuck with it for more than a couple of years. So I'm sure there are some out there, but it's just not very many that I'm aware of.
I honestly really admire your intuitive approach of not tracking and just going with satiation. For me, I have honestly been tracking my macros since I want to say 2014. And so that's almost become my natural. And I have really, really, really wanted to move to a more intuitive approach. And for the first time in my life, following carnivore, I finally feel like I'll be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because like you said, all of those cravings and food addictions they're out the window. And so I don't suddenly worry about going off the rail or losing track and just gaining a bunch of body fat because I no longer have that fear. And I think that's so powerful.
Being carb fueled as opposed to animal based animal fuel sets you up for success.
Yeah. So I really do hope to get to the place that you're at today. I really do admire that.
Well, it's something I think is worth mentioning that now you have an advantage, and it's an advantage that I had. So maybe it is something, because I do tell people when they start not to measure or monitor, but an advantage of, tracking macros for a long time is you have a better intuitive sense than right now about it because you've tracked for so long.
Yeah.
Someone that's never tracked anything, they could potentially, I mean, they would benefit from tracking just because it will build their intuitive sense of, how much am I eating of what? And so when it comes to like, if they're going to tinker with their diet a little bit, they have a better intuitive sense of how to do that.
Yeah.
So there is a good side to tracking, because I've tracked macros, in the past a lot, and that's how I built up, kind of that intuitive sense. So I shouldn't say like, no, you shouldn't track at all. But I think more of what I'm saying, if someone's starting carnivore, restricting food intake, like if you're still fighting willpower, like don't do that, because like one of the biggest benefits you're going to get is you're going to overcome that need to fight that relationship with food.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole, like, that's one of the biggest benefits you can get. So that's why I don't like people to restrict what they eat when they start.
Yeah. So like advice to new people starting carnivore: get through that transient phase where you may see some weight fluctuations, some changes in your body. And when you reach like steady state, when you reach your body's new equilibrium on animal based, then focus on your body composition. And
if you want to.
Yeah. If that is your main goal.
Yeah.
I like the healing focus.
It's a loaded, because I've talked about this, like a homeostatic set point.
Yeah.
And it's a loaded question, because people are like, well, when will I get there? How will I know? And there's various like adaptations that someone will go through. Like they'll get fat adapted, and then another system gets adapted, then another system. So it's not like unfortunately, it's not like a light switch where you're like, oh, now I'm all set.
Yeah.
But it's something that's more gradual. And so it can take time. So that's why I think that a long-term view is very important when it comes to like, if you really want this to work for you, like you need a long-term view.
Yeah.
If you're just trying to get some short-term, like something, it's probably not the right diet approach.
No. And speaking of taking this diet long-term, actually one of the questions that we get asked a ton is, isn't your diet extremely expensive? Like you're just buying a ton of meat. Like, isn't that get pricey? What is your advice for people to make animal-based carnivore diet sustainable price-wise?
Yeah, you guys just convinced me to buy caviar. I know what you're saying. No, but seriously, as far as like cost, I mean, this is a big topic onto itself, because you'll be like, look, if you're healthy, like just think about how much you save, like in the long term. Like that's taking the whole long-term view again. Like I think the average of American adults on like 8 prescription medications. Yeah. Like, so it's hard to, the cliche is like health is priceless or something, it's like, you can't really put a price on that. But when it comes to dollars and cents, and people have to meet budgets month to month, like I get it. And like what I say is do the best you can, if you cut some expenses in your life, don't go out to so many restaurants, like people spend a lot of money going out. Like I don't spend hardly any money going out, except for like when my girlfriend drags me to go out to eat somewhere every blue moon.
The pros of social life.
And even if you're not, like if you're like living in poverty, like you can make it work. Like ground beef and eggs and liver, like it can be done on a budget as well. Someone contacted me today because have you heard of like the tick bite where you get an allergy to red meat? And he's like, well, can I make this work? And I was like, you can definitely make it work. Like you got to focus on seafood, you got to eat white meat, you can eat eggs, you might consider adding some dairy, but like you can make it work. So same kind of analogies. Like if you're on a financial budget and it's tight, like you can make it work. If it's a priority, you can make it work. So obviously, if you're eating all grass-fed, grass-finished ribeyes, that's an expensive diet, well, no doubt. Like I don't eat like that. I would like to eat like that. Right? Maybe someday I'll eat like that. But so just do the best you can. It'll bring the whole argument to conventional versus grass-fed, grass-finished. Which I think, like, look, if you're on a budget, don't worry about it. Do conventional. Buy what you can afford, and you're doing miles better than you would be otherwise. So
I agree, and I think that when you look at it in terms of what else you're not indulging in suddenly, like you actually save so much money. And
like expensive almond butter, we used to buy that weekly. Oh my gosh, so expensive.
And so
and supplements too.
Yeah,
like people spend hundreds of dollars a month on just supplements. I'm like, look, what if you just ate your supplements in red meat and caviar?
It's so true, honestly. And this is just personal experience. I used to spend so much money on like creatine, whey protein isolate, and thinking that this was like the magic tool I needed to build more muscle and lose fat. Yet here I am for the first time in my life building muscle. It seems quicker than I ever have with this bioavailable nutrients.
Yeah.
That like it's mind blowing the difference, and
Yep.
just it's incredible. The best thing we did for ourselves to make carnivore more cost effective is buying a full cow. And so we no longer have to go to the store anymore during the week. We just pull from our freezer. So I'm curious, how do you where do you actually source your meat from? And then what is
where do you go shopping?
Where do you shop? And what does a day of food look like for Kevin Stock?
Yeah, so I'm in the market for a cow. So I just finished half a cow because I did the same as you guys did. I went to a farmer here in Missouri, picked up the cow, and I ate that it only lasted a few months. So I got to go pick up another one. Luckily, so my girlfriend's uncle is a farmer in Missouri, so I got one of his cows. In the meantime, I shop at Fresh Time. I'm eating a combination of I buy some grass-fed, grass-finished meat there. I buy some conventional meat there. So I'm just like everyone else, and so that's what I'm doing now. Typical day of diet really is basically the most typical day is beef for 3 meals. Beef for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, obviously, that's not every day. So I have eggs, once or twice a week. I have liver once every couple of weeks. I have salmon once every couple of weeks. Seafood. I have other meats like pork and chicken, just less commonly. So I eat from a lot of the animal kingdom, but beef just is probably 80% because I feel good on beef. It's economical. It's easy. It just makes sense for where I live and et cetera. But it's not saying I have anything against, other meats. It's just for the, bang for your buck and nutrition wise, beef is a top notch choice for me.
Yeah. Honestly, I notice like an improved mental sharpness when I focus on ruminants, as opposed to like incorporating too much chicken and pork. And I don't know if that's just because they're fed grain at some point, if that affects my mental state, but.
Yeah, they definitely have different ratios of fats, especially like the omega-3 to omega-6. So like, I think that's important. I know you guys, you get your Dippin' Dots. So like that helps fix any skewed balance.
Yeah, now you can add your carnivore Dippin' Dots to your diet every day.
I know. I'm getting ready to try them. So probably tomorrow, maybe today.
Curious to know how you like those. So you brought up fat, your fats and your proteins. So what is a good ratio for you for the fat to protein ratio?
So I am on the more protein than most people side of things, meaning I might not hit ketogenic ratios every day, like 70% of your calories from fat, 30% from protein. That's just very general ketogenic ratios. Yeah. I'm probably closer to 60-40, even 50-50. Like I said, I don't track, but usually my typical day, I usually have the most fat in the morning. So that'll be like my most keto meal, like the one with the most fat, either the fattiest cut of steak I have or the eggs, etc. And then I tend to eat leaner throughout the day. And really, that is mainly just for body composition purposes. If I didn't have any body composition goals, like I was fine carrying a little bit more body fat, I would eat probably 70-30 most meals.
Interesting. So do you find that you feel better mentally 70-30, or what would be the reason?
I feel like at 70-30, I feel more satiated all day long.
Yeah.
I don't get hungry as much. But if I have muscle building goals or fat burning goals, I find if I slightly skew that ratio towards protein, it doesn't impact me negatively from like how I feel mentally, sharpness, energy, just basically feeling good. And yet I can get the body composition I want. I think if I push a little bit further, like look, I pushed it further, then I start seeing the downward trend of eating too much protein to fat. And usually I can do that for a couple of days and get away with it. But after like 3 or 4 days of too lean, then I know like I get fat hungry. And so it's something that might be good for people to like experiment with. You get a feel for like, I know what it feels like if I'm low on fat, like I get hungry for fat. And so, it's a way that I can keep an easy pulse on. I'd be like, oh man, I've been eating too lean the last couple of days. So that's how I structure my diet, just from kind of having top priorities as like mental and just getting work done and being the best I can be every day, and also some body composition goals.
Yeah, I love that intuitive approach there too. Again, so Ashley and I are currently like in a mini bulk
Operation Hot Dogs to Bratwurst.
Yeah, and so come
Me too.
2020, you are too. Come 2020, we plan to do some sort of mini cut to chisel out the muscles. So we're definitely going to be taking that approach where we cut back on the fats a little bit and go a little bit higher protein. Needless to say, we do not eat low protein whatsoever. We're like you. We do
Team high fat and high protein.
Yeah,
high fat, high protein.
Yeah,
which is essentially just higher calories, but that's fine.
Yeah, it all boils down to calories, as we know, weight gain. But I'm curious to your opinion on, do you think it differs between gender? And have you seen any examples of this with people that you've dealt with?
So I don't know anything conclusively, but from observationally, I feel like women do better with higher fats than men.
Yeah.
And I think some of it comes down to like differences in muscle mass, how much muscle mass, one gender carries versus the other. I think some of it has to do with like, the ultimate, what define lean, because like women, like when they define lean, it's usually a higher body fat percentage than a man might define lean, just because women tend to carry higher percentage body fat.
Yeah.
So that said, I think that's kind of like my observation that I made. Like I said, I don't know anything conclusively. What I do know, or at least recommend, is that when people do cut, look, if you're cutting, what you're going to want to create is a caloric deficit. And if you're creating a caloric deficit and you're trying to keep ketogenic ratios with 70% of your calories or more coming from fat, that means 30% or less of your calories are coming from protein in a caloric deficit, which means your protein is getting pretty low.
Yeah.
And that scares me personally, because you start losing lean body mass. Like I learned this lesson the hard way, and I lost a significant amount of lean body mass doing exactly that. So
I was going to ask about, I know you did an experiment where you lowered your protein. I remember reading about it in a Saturday 7. So that did not go well?
Yeah, so that was the ketogenic experiment that led me into carnivore, where I was like, look, I'm doing this strict ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
And so I was fairly lean at that time. So like my goal was just stay lean. I wasn't in like any kind of steep competition prep or anything like that. It was not extravagant as far as like a caloric deficit. And I limited protein below a gram so I could be at ketogenic ratios. And I lost a lot of lean body mass.
Honestly, because our goals are still a lot of like, physique goals.
Yeah.
And hearing these stories about people who have lowered their protein, we've just never done it. Like
I'm not willing to.
Too scared. So I think when we cut come spring, I think we're going to take the approach that you did, where you incorporate some fat cycling, right?
Yeah.
So you have high fat days every once in a while to satisfy that fat craving. You want to talk a little bit about how you structured that in the past?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, like the number one concept about, I think, any body composition goal, whether it's building muscle or losing fat, is having this idea of progression. Yeah. So not trying to get to the finish line on day one. Because if you do, like, and a long explanation on why that's a bad idea. So basically what I'm saying is, let's say you're going to create a caloric deficit. You want to create a small deficit initially, and then you want to gradually increase that deficit over time. You don't want to just drop your caloric intake like 2,000 calories less than on the first day. Like that's just a recipe for disaster. So that's kind of the number one overarching thesis for me when I'm doing body composition stuff, is like, look, it needs to be progression. You should have like, look, this is where I am. This is where I want to go. This is my time frame. This is how I'm going to gradually, increase cardio over time. Like, I don't recommend people going out and just do an hour of cardio every day initially. Like, start off with 15 minutes, and then the next week maybe do 20, maybe then 30 the next week, whatever. So it's this idea of progression. And then from a macronutrient perspective, what I like to do is, like I said, I'll get fat hungry if fats go too low. And one way to, cycle fats that I found to be very effective is like, if you have higher protein days for a few days in a row, lower fat on those days, not low fat. I'm not talking like 20 grams of fat, but just lower fat. And then on like the fourth day, you boost up your fat. So you would come back up closer to like your maintenance amount of calories. It's kind of like a refeed day. It's very like this is a classical approach in bodybuilding that they would do with carbohydrates.
Yeah.
But instead of carbohydrates, you do that with fat. And then, so I mean, and there's a million ways you can structure this. You could do like 3 low calorie, lower fat, higher protein days, followed by 1 higher fat, higher calorie day, and just cycle that. Like that's kind of a standard 3 on, 1 off concept. You could do, you can structure that a million ways. You can do one day where it's real like lower calories, next day is a little bit higher, and then a full high calorie day, and then drop it back down. Like, so there's a million ways to structure that, and they all work to varying degrees. Like I said, the idea is to me is always progression.
Yeah, I think we're going to definitely take that kind of approach. And this is another question that we get asked a ton, and I'm sure you do too. Well, if you keep your fat too low and your protein too high, aren't you worried about gluconeogenesis? Like, how do you respond to that type of question?
Well, I mean, that person, I get that question a lot. I'm gonna be writing on protein. That's my next article that I'm gonna be writing on, because like they just fundamentally don't understand gluconeogenesis. I don't understand it either, apparently. But I get that question a lot, and it's hard to explain. Like, look, I don't really want to type out all this biochem into an Instagram message.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's why I'm writing an article on it, so I can just reference someone to an article. But yeah, so that's definitely just not a valid concern of like protein just turning into sugar, because it's a demand-driven process. So short of just saying like that's not an issue. But I guess what I generally ask questions is like I respond with a question. I'm like, well, what are you afraid of? Okay, and so like depending on what they respond, I can answer from there. So are you afraid of your blood sugar going high or something like that? Well, then I'm gonna be like, okay, monitor your blood glucose and tell me what happens. Yeah. And they'll be like, oh, it's really stable all the time. I'm like, oh yeah, it is. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of ways you can answer a question like that.
I think that people will just have to wait till your long article.
Yeah, I'll better explain it in there.
I'm very excited. That's gonna be awesome.
I do. Okay, as a follow-up though, I would say that if someone is switching from a standard American diet where their body really relies on carbs for fuel and switching to keto or carnivore, I would say that eating fat in the beginning, like prioritizing fat, is kind of important to help your body switch to fat metabolism.
Agree.
Because if you're doing just super high protein after going standard American diet, I feel like that gluconeogenesis maybe could potentially be an issue and your body could just be confused. But once you're fat adapted, like you said, show me your blood sugar levels, like you're going to be okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, you bring a good point there. It's a double-edged sword. Yeah. So if you go from a standard American diet to a high-fat ketogenic diet, guess what? You're going to have all kinds of bowel issues.
Yes.
So like there's downsides to that too. But if you have too much protein, like you said, you're going to feel tired. Your cortisol is probably going to be super high. Your sleep's going to be affected negatively. So like there's it's a double-edged sword. Yeah. So sometimes I'm like, you can kind of take your pick. A lot of times it's like, yeah, there's no easy answer besides saying like sometimes you're gonna suffer a little bit during the transition. Like there's strategies to try and minimize that suffering, which I think are smart to implement. But there is some definite symptoms.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of people, it's comforting to know there's people like you out there who have put in the research, and we can find these resources on your website to how to deal with all these symptoms. So to help our listeners out, where can they find you and all the research you've done on carnivore?
Well, so I put most of my articles just on my website, kevinstock.io.
Yeah.
I also, on meat.health, Meat Health website, is where there's a lot of this getting started stuff. Okay. So the 30-day guide, a bunch of guides too. You can just download. Usually what I do is I write a bunch of articles, and then I like to turn it into a more comprehensive guide so people can download a PDF and print it off or whatnot. The idea was I was actually wrote the book. And so I was going to write a book about all this. And then I was like, you know what? It's just better if this information is on the internet for free, whatever. So I did that. So I broke it down into articles. And I'm turning the articles into guides, PDF guides. And I think eventually I'll probably bring it all together into a book for people that eventually want that. But that's not going to be until at least end of 2020, 2021 or something like that. So just for now, just on my website. Like I tell people, the best place is just my Saturday 7 newsletter. Yes. That's my central hub where it's like, I'm going to put my best stuff in the Saturday newsletter. I put stuff on social media as well, but like the hub is the newsletter.
Yeah, hey guys, I honestly hang out at the Saturday 7 every Saturday morning. He provides a nice little quote too. Something you quoted today is, who's counting on you to become the person you want to become? Focus on them. So there's always a takeaway message. It always makes me smile. So you really ought to get on Kevin Stock's Saturday 7 subscription list. So,
and
I
honestly,
appreciate it.
his website, guys, it is so easy to follow. He doesn't write in this like super scientific way.
Yeah.
He breaks down the science for you. Great guides to get started on carnivore. Head over to his website now.
And I also have to say, I noticed that you're getting a little bit more high tech on Instagram.
Yes,
Your posts are getting so cool.
Did you see? I found a couple of tools. I stumbled upon them. I'm like, wow, that makes it easy.
You're gonna have to share what you're doing. It's so cool. Yeah, we actually commented that this morning. You posted like a Twitter message that like types in video form.
Very cool.
Look at you all
Yeah.
that been happening.
Yeah, I found that the other day.
Nice.
Sweet.
So as a final question for all of our guests, we like to ask them, what is your favorite cut? And you know, we are nose to tail, so it can be any part of the animal, and any animal is fair game.
Ooh, that's a good one. You know what? My favorite cut is a chuck eye steak.
Agreed.
Because it is the poor man's ribeye, and
Yes.
I feel for us poor men out there.
Wait, that's so funny. That's absolutely our favorite cut. It's
We
not
have-
that funny, but
we have a ton of chuck steak in our fridge right now.
yeah.
Thought up.
You know what? It's like the best bang for your buck. It is every bit as good as a ribeye, and it's cheaper, and I love them.
And a great fat to protein ratio.
Yeah, agreed.
Perfect. Yeah, it's perfect fat to protein ratio. And yeah, most people don't know. It's literally cut right next to the ribeye. So it is basically a ribeye.
Yeah, guys, if you're trying to save money on carnivore, honestly, just eat chuck steak.
Yes.
Don't buy ribeyes anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. We had a lot of fun talking to you, and it's always good to know a little bit more about who you are.
We'll have to get you
Thanks
back
for
on
having
the
me on.
podcast.
I always love talking with you guys.
Yeah.
My day's always better. I thought we should just do a podcast every weekend, so it's like just to lift me up for the weekend.
I mean, I'm down. We can.
We need to get him on again.
Yeah, follow up.
We've got so many questions. But
Yeah, guys. Oh, guys, and also we were recently on Kevin's podcast too, talking about carbs. So if you're
Yeah,
curious-
that was dynamite. Like I think they would really like that. And like I mentioned on your guys' YouTube video yesterday, I get asked all the time about doing a carnivore training program. I'm like, you know what? Strong.Sistas, they do a lot of like training. Like we should double team and
honestly, let's do it.
film a
Guys, be on the
carnivore
lookout
workout.
for this. Be on the lookout for this.
Yeah. Exclusive details. All right, we can't say any more.
All right,
Keep it
yeah,
a secret.
keep it a secret.
All right, Kevin. It was really good to see you today. Hope you have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.